This episode is brought to you by Skillshare, inspiring discovery through creativity. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Hardwood podcast, where we discuss your craft and the culture. And this week, we're bringing back documentary filmmaker and storyteller Jude Charles, as we discuss how to choose the right clients, how to educate the client, your post-production workflow, and how to use leverage to your advantage. That and much more. Stay locked in. What's up, guys? We are back with another episode of the Hardwood podcast. And, as summer's approaching and, for a lot of businesses, that means, business is booming. And right now, things are turning, for the better. It seems like, things are, normalizing a little bit. And, a couple of weeks ago, we had a, documentary filmmaker and, talked about storytelling and, some of the tactics he uses when he's tackling some of these projects. So, we're going to sit down here for a part 2 segment, and we're going to be touching base on more of the business aspect. And, Jude, welcome to the podcast. It's been a while.
Yeah, definitely been a while. Thank you, Rod, for having me back. Last conversation was really a fun conversation. So I am excited to dive deeper into continuing this conversation about what we talked about last time: dramatic demonstration of proof, storytelling, and just how to grow your video production business.
Definitely. And, I got a lot of stuff, from the last podcast as far as, mimicking some of the tactics that you use. A lot of stuff that really, stood out to me was, finding that vulnerable position for your clients and how that was kind of a driver, if you will, for most of these clients of yours. And, to touch on that, when you're going with clients from like, different types of industries, right? It could be from cosmetics, from tech. You have this one method that we touched on, and that's called road mapping. So for the audience that probably didn't catch the last episode, let's summarize a little bit of what that is exactly.
Yeah, so road mapping for me is like, it's kind of like how in production we would do a treatment or a story outline. That's what road mapping is for me with my clients. So I spend 8 hours with a client, and I talk about everything in their business. I talk about their stories from where they were born to where they are now and how they got there. Road mapping is how do we figure out the story that we're going to tell through this documentary series. How is it going to actually impact your business? Like, why are people going to care about hearing this or watching this docuseries? Mm-hmm. That's what road mapping is for me. I charge a client for it. We come up with, like I said, the story outline. We do a storyboard, and then understanding how are they going to use it in their marketing. And because of that client, then they don't just use it for the docuseries. They use it in other parts of their business as well. But yes, I've been in business for 15 years, and I started doing road mapping in 2010, doing it and charging for it in 2010.
Yeah, and when you talk with clients, right, you kind of tell them up front, right, that hey, I can't give you a quote. Like if we're talking about doing this, in the long form, you go up to them and tell them, hey, I got to meet with you. I got to sit down with you. I got to know your story, right?
Yeah.
Because I think you said, I think the phrase was, you're searching for the truth when you're talking with your clients.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. So I don't take on any project without first going through road mapping. Whether I only do documentaries and docuseries for entrepreneurs. So no matter what, if the client comes to me, if they're coming to me because they heard about me from someone else, or if they're coming to me through a strategic partner, I don't take any project without going through road mapping. And like I mentioned, I charge for road mapping. So right now, as of this recording, road mapping is $20,000. And yeah, I'm searching for the truth. I'm growing up, I used to watch TV shows like Cops or like Law and Order, Nash Bridges, NYPD Blue. And the thing I loved about those shows is that you would see the detective in the show trying to figure out why did this person commit the crime, or who committed the crime and why, the motive behind it.
Right.
I take the same approach with the entrepreneur where cool, you started a business, you grew it, and it's successful, but why this business? Why are you passionate about it? Why are you the person that has to lead this, and why do you care so much? That's the same process. I The same way a detective does that on TV is the same thing I'm doing in road mapping, because again, without it, I don't know what to film in the docuseries. Like
Hmm.
it could be, I could, of course, I could selfishly want to create very cool looking creative B-roll shots, but if it doesn't pertain to the story, I don't need to film it. That's just what's important to me. What is it that is important to the audience is what's most important, and that's why we go through road mapping.
Yeah, and your tactics just goes through, straight to the meat and the potatoes, right? You don't go for the, like you said, right? You just want to get that story that probably they don't even know they even have, right? As far as when you told your clients, and we talked about this a little bit too, how for them it's probably like a therapy session, right? It's kind of like,
Yeah.
whoa, like I didn't think, or I didn't know I could even elaborate or illustrate anything about my business like this. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like,
I think what I realize is that clients downplay certain parts of their stories. They look at it as it's not important. Like, for example, I actually did a road mapping session this past weekend as of this recording. And the guy that he runs a marketing agency. It's successful. He has 15 employees. I think he's had over 300 clients over the years, and he often said to himself, what he sells is competence, right? So he sells that he's able to help his clients do marketing really well, where they can grow their business.
mm,
And he was like, after going through the road mapping session, what he realized is what clients really cared about was character. Um, I think and this guy has a great story. He is an immigrant. When he first came to the United States, he came from India, very young, straight out of the military, Indian military, and um, he's passionate about helping entrepreneurs. He's passionate about. He knows what it's like. He's failed in 3 different businesses, and he knows what it's like to fail in a business and to have to go home and tell your wife this didn't work out the way I thought it did. It could,
yeah,
and part of the story that we recently resurfaced or found out about is that there's this practice that his clinic that he worked with, and the guy that was running it, he was running a successful clinic until the pandemic hit. And this guy was running a clinic that was doing $3 million in business, and then the pandemic hit, and by December of 2020, he only had $67 to his name.
yeah,
And so I asked him. We did his interview. I interviewed the guy, the guy that owned the clinic, because he's doing well now. Because my client decided to, even though he wasn't making money, he decided to continue doing marketing work for him. He was like, "Look, I know you're not making any money right now. You can't pay me right now, but we're gonna get you back on your feet. And once you get back on your feet, then you can catch up with whatever it is that you owe me." And that guy, the guy that owned the clinic, he said to me in the interview, he said, if it wasn't for this guy that runs the marketing agency, I would have lost my practice. And it's a practice that he's had for over 30 years. So it's stories like that that matter more than just what cool website can he put up or what new marketing material can he create. It's really about that you have someone that's going to be a business partner with you. You get someone that's going to really care about your business even when they're not making money. That says so much more about him than just that he's really competent and he knows what he's doing. So yeah, those are the stories that I look for in road mapping, because those are the stories that need to be told, that makes you different, that makes you stand out. And what I realize is that after doing so many of these road mapping sessions, clients are just diminishing the stories that they have. They're sitting on gold. They have so much gold, and it's so deep, but they're sitting on it because they think it's not important. And that's what we are able to uncover in road mapping. And that's why it feels like a therapy session for them, because when you connect the dots in that way and you realize truly the impact that you're making and how important it is, um, it unlocks so many other doors for you.
yeah. So have you ever experience, right? When you're going through this phase, right? Now, we're gonna be talking more as far as how Jude Charles kind of tackles these, right? So let's dive in from where you get the client, right? And we'll touch a little bit right here before as far as how do you get your clients, but before that, so Jude is going through road mapping, but has there been a moment where you haven't? Maybe there's like, you know what? I don't know if I could tell a story for you, or I don't know, maybe like you don't get that story, right? You don't get that golden nugget where that you're looking for. Has there been a moment dealing with the client where you felt like, you know what, it's not gonna happen?
Yeah, there has. I in the very early when I first started doing road mapping, I had some good successes, some good stories that I was able to tell, and then there was a time that came up where I realized I didn't have a story. And when I was working with a client, I was realizing this. Part of what I should mention too, road mapping for me is that if I feel like the client's not the right fit, it's at that point that I tell the client we're not the right fit. We can't continue this project.
Okay.
So it's a way for me to pick the clients I want to work with. I only take on 5 clients a year, and I pick those clients. I don't just take on any client that comes to me.
Yeah.
And one thing I wasn't doing beforehand that I learned with this one client was, so we're going through the session. He's telling me, different stories, but I just felt like it wasn't going deep enough. And what I realized is that he just wasn't willing to open up. He wasn't willing to go in that deeper area, that deeper part. I don't know if it's because he didn't think it mattered, or if he just didn't want to tell those stories. But what I said to him is, look, if you're not willing to be vulnerable, you're not willing to be open, we can't work together. And I wasn't doing that beforehand. I wasn't doing that like before we ever get to the road mapping session. I wasn't saying like this is a requirement before we get to road mapping. You've got to be ready to open up. And so I've had that happen. I think after the third time it happened, I was like, okay, I need to change the way people think about road mapping. Because I think what people were thinking about road mapping was like, oh, we're going to come here. We're just going to talk about what dates we need to film and what scenes I need to film and why it's important,
Yeah.
like what I do in my business. And it's so much more than that. And so
Yeah, no,
I
that's
yeah.
true. Like, sorry to cut you off there, but a lot of the clients or people that I deal with, they're so like they don't understand the process that it takes even before it gets started, right? So that's where it's another where you have to educate them on that aspect as well.
Yeah. And I didn't realize how important it was to educate the client it's not even just throughout road mapping, throughout every step, every phase. So I have 3 different phases that I work with in my business with my clients. Phase 1 is dramatic clarity, which is what road mapping is. We get really clear on who you are, what you stand for, and what you're about. Dramatic demonstration, that's when we create the story. That's where I'm filming the documentary or documentary series. And then dramatic leverage is, okay, we know what you're about, who you are and what you stand for. We filmed the story that matches those things that we figured out. Now let's make sure the right people are seeing it at the right time on the right platform. So that's dramatic leverage. Through every phase, I need to educate the client on not just why this is important that we're going through this phase, but like what they need to do and what needs to happen in order to make this successful. I wasn't doing that before I realized like these clients were coming in with the wrong frame of mind.
Yeah, I feel like it's just boom. It's like, oh, bring the camera and I'll be ready, and that's it, right?
Right, yeah. And so what I started doing is, like, let's say for road mapping, I would do an email series that I would send them, right? And so like let's take this, and I would tell stories throughout the emails. And so let's take this one email that I send. I think it's the very first one that I send, where I tell the story of when I went skydiving. I went skydiving for my 30th birthday, and it was the scariest thing. I've always wanted to go skydiving, but
Not until you're up there.
until you're up there, you really realize what you're getting ready to do. You're jumping out of an airplane at 10,000 feet in the air. Like, it's nerve wracking. And that wasn't the part that actually made it nerve wracking for me. What made it nerve wracking is that as soon as you walk in, they hand you 5 pages of paperwork
Oh,
that
yeah.
says, like, it reminds you on each page, you might die.
Yeah.
And they have you sign that because they're having you sign it to say, if you do die, you can't sue us. You or your family member can't sue us.
Yeah.
And so that's the part that gets really scary. And then you realize you're going up in the air 10,000 feet, and they're like, yeah, as soon as we get up to 10,000 feet, you're just going to jump out. And it's like, wait, what? But the reason I use that story is because I said, as much as, even though I was really scared, I didn't know what was going to happen, I still landed on 2 feet because I had an instructor who walked me through the steps and who jumped with me out of the airplane. And so
Yeah.
because of that, I was able to land on 2 feet. And so what I said, so how I tie that to what we're getting ready to do in road mapping is I said, it's going to be really scary. You're going to have to get really vulnerable. I'm going to ask you questions that you may have never been asked before in your career or in your life, but you've got to trust the process and trust that at the end of it, you're going to be excited that we landed on 2 feet. Like, you got to trust that I am going to get you there. And it does two things. It not only gets them prepared for road mapping, but it shows how I use storytelling to make the point. And so they know now, okay, if he's able to use his own story and tell his own story in that way to make the point, oh, I know he's going to be able to do this with me. And so, yeah, there's a lot of education that has to happen. And I didn't always understand that. Like, I think last time we talked in part 1, I mentioned that in my first 5 years of business, I started this business in 2006. My first 5 years, I failed at business. I struggled to make money. And a lot of it had to do with, part of it was that, just education, educating the client and walking them through each phase. But also the other part was just, I wasn't telling my own stories. Like, I was just coming in thinking, oh yeah, they just want a video. And I was really talented at creating these stories, so they would just get it. They would just understand. And that wasn't the case. I needed to also connect them to who I was and connect them to my story in order to get them to trust, to know who I am, like what I have to say, and trust that I can get, that I can put their story together.
Yeah, and in the process, you created value for yourself, right? You
Absolutely,
created,
yeah.
yeah, you created that. How would you put it? Through that process of failing in business and then succeeding, right?
Mm-hmm.
You found yourself where, okay, I did make it to where I wanted to be. I did succeed with this client, and I think you mentioned you with Keisha, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was the turning point for you, right? That where you found yourself and the value that you provided for there and now and beyond, right? So for a lot of people, I think it's easy for them to say, oh, I'm a great documentary filmmaker, but in essence, it's kind of like you said, right? And that's a great analogy as far as jumping off the plane, right? But you have that instructor with you every step of the way, right? So trusting the process and making sure your client understands that is definitely a good piece of advice, for not just documentary filmmakers, but just coaches and teachers in general.
Yeah, I think it's important, if you're in the creative field, it's important to understand what it takes to actually run a business. And what I mean by that is the sales and marketing side of it. When I mentioned that I failed the first 5 years in business, it was because, yeah, I was really, really talented. I think I started this business at 17 years old, and it was because there was a teacher that saw how talented I was, and she was like, you could start a business.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand the sales and marketing side. And if you, as a creative, it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're doing graphic design and making posters, let's say movie posters, so to speak, and let's say, or if you're an editor, you're a full-time editor, it doesn't matter what it is that you're doing. You have to understand sales and marketing. You have to understand what it is that other person that wants to hand over money to you or coming to you to say how much, you have to understand what it is that they're really looking for. I used to think that clients were coming to me looking for, they knew they wanted to create a documentary and that's it. Or they knew they wanted to tell their story and that's it. But what they were really looking for is they're looking to create another asset in their business that will help them make money. And they were told at the time, video is important and storytelling is important, so that's what you need to do. But they didn't really understand how to use it. They didn't really understand, what does it mean that I'm going to tell my story and that people are going to buy because I told my story. Right. And they didn't understand, so with me now, with selling them on, oh yeah, of course you got to work with me, and how much I charge, is like, they didn't have in their mind why it's going to be this much or what the real value is out of doing this. Um, so you've got to understand the sales and marketing side of it. Like if I just hired a new edit studio that I'm working with, right? Why did I decide to hire a new edit studio? Is it because I just wanted, to have an edit team? Not necessarily. It was because I wanted to save time. Like I was spending so much time in editing, and I've gone through the process before of hiring editors that it wasn't saving me time. So time was the most important thing, the most important asset. And when you're as an editor, when you're looking to sell me and say, it's not about how cool you are at editing or even how experienced you are. It's a matter of, are you going to save me time?
Yeah.
Right?
So
Yeah.
so you ended up as far as your post production, you have an editing team or person for doing your work as far as currently.
Yeah. Right now I have an edit team of 3 guys. They're running an edit studio. So I hired their company to do all of my editing from now on. Um, Previously I did majority of the edits. So I've had editors before where they're kind of do the first cut and then I'll come in and finalize it. And then there was a period the last maybe 2-3 years where I've been doing all the editing, but now I'm back to having an edit studio, um, doing all of my editing right now.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I feel like sometimes, when you're tackling a lot of projects and you just want to focus on just directing or just telling the story right from A to B. The editing process could be grueling sometimes.
Oh yeah.
If you have several projects at once, especially, right? So
Yeah.
um, that's something where I feel like I need to explore, in the future as well.
Yeah, I would
Because
explore it early. I would explore it
yeah,
early on. I mean, there was benefits to me having an editor early on. I didn't have it when I first started business, but I did over time. And I think the beauty of it is you definitely have to learn. The reason I'm telling you like started early on is because you're gonna make mistakes. You're not gonna hire the right guy the first few times, or maybe you will get lucky. But understanding the process of editing too. Like after the first few failed attempts at hiring an editor, I started writing down like every step that I was taking and how long it was taking for me to edit projects. What certain things that I could do to cut the time down, like all those things you would want to learn early on. And I think hiring editors early will help you understand those right and wrong things to do, and most importantly, how you like to work. Um, so yeah, I think doing it early on will be very very helpful.
yeah. Do you find yourself kind of still going through that process with the editor, like just same way you're going through your client? So obviously you're going through step by step process with your
Yeah,
client, right?
yeah. Yeah, so when I hired these guys, even though they've been editing for a while, what I did is I did an editing workshop with them. And it was a 2-day workshop where I walked them through my process. So of course I told you about my dramatic demonstration of proof process.
Okay.
So I walked them through like a whole project from beginning to end, how what the final roadmap was for the project, and then how I filmed certain scenes, why I filmed it the way that I filmed it, and what happened once I got into the edit. Why I edited certain things the way that I edited them, because obviously these are documentary stories, so there's content that's filmed over time, and then there's content that I use that's not at the certain time that I filmed it, like within the storyline.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
I feel like
yeah,
that's the part too, right?
yeah,
Where it's like you were there, the emotion, what. So it's like it's for you to kind of it's almost like you said, right? You had a 2-day workshop, right?
yep.
So I mean, do you have that 2-day workshop at the beginning of every documentary project, or it's kind of like this is it and this is how it's going to be for the rest of the projects?
Not necessarily, but I think, I mean, you make a great point. I think what I did is I basically did what I do in road mapping, right? Like road mapping I do before every
Right.
project.
Right.
So with this editing workshop with these guys, I basically did a roadmap. I showed them I didn't just expect them to know how to edit these stories. I showed them why I made the decisions that I made. But it's an educational process, right? Just like I try to educate my clients in the beginning or through every phase, I'm educating them through every phase. They can't come into this and know exactly how I think or why I think the way that I think, or even if they watch all my work, it still won't make sense unless I give them the behind the scenes of it, right? And
Yeah,
so,
that's the part of it, man.
yeah,
Because
that's the
it's hard for me right now to give this short film that I have to somebody else to edit, because it's something where I know how it starts and I know how it ends, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, it's like almost like taking a risk, right? I'm taking a risk on um, this crew or this person to pretty much read and understand what I'm trying to, illustrate, and then pretty, put it into a story that is the same that I'm thinking of, as far as, from start to finish.
Yeah, and I
That
tell
so
you what.
that's
Yeah,
the risk. That's the risk that I feel like, oh damn.
yeah, it's a risk, but I tell you what, I think here's what I'm learning through the process. It makes you a better director because if you're able to now, it makes you a better director for multiple reasons, and it's important that it makes you a better director. One, it makes you a better director because then you know how to explain why you're making certain decisions, right? But more importantly, it helps you practice explaining your vision, and that is important when you're talking to your clients. Because if you can explain your vision and you're able to walk them through your vision and get them to understand your vision, now they trust you. Now
Yeah.
it is at a point, like I'm at a point in business where when I submit the first cut to the client, the first cut is usually a final cut. I call it the first cut for the client, but it's really a final cut to me. And when I
Yeah.
present that to the client, I'm at a point where I don't even get many changes at all, if any changes. Like the only changes that they'll probably make is graphics, where they'll say, "Oh, that's the wrong title for the person that I'm interviewing."
Mhm.
But changing scenes or saying take that complete thing out or move this here, move that there, like I'm at a point in business where I don't even get that anymore. And part of it is road mapping, but the other part is because I'm explaining the vision to such a degree that they trust. Okay, if this is the final edit, it's there for a reason. Like Jude put this together for a reason, and he knows and I know based on how he put it together, it's going to work. It's not a matter of let me just tell him to change it because I want him to change it. Like it's a matter of trust, and I think even though it's a risk, definitely a risk for me to hire this edit studio because I remember telling my client, I have a client that I've worked with for 3 years. And I remember even telling her that I've hired a new edit studio, and she was like, "Are you sure?" Because she's like, "Your editing is the crafting of the story. Like, I love the way you edit these stories together." And she's like, "Are you sure? Like, are they going to be able to do it the same way you do it?" Like, it is a risk on my end, but I think it's also a benefit. It's a bigger benefit on the other side when one, I'm saving my time, but two, I get better at explaining my vision and being able to educate people and walk them through what I'm doing.
Yeah, several great points there, right? As far as, explaining your vision, right? And that's almost like you're working out a muscle, right? If you keep on doing that, it for sure makes you a better director. That's 100%. If you could do that, and that's why in big studios, right? You have those directors, and easily, you have these several different crews in each different little departments, right? So,
Yep.
there has to be one main person, coordinating everybody to the end goal. Hey guys, it's Hardwood Rod here. And have you ever wanted to learn something new? Well, you gotta check out Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creative and curious people on topics including illustration, design, photography, video, and much more. On Skillshare, millions of members come together to find inspiration and take the next step in their creative journey. Get 12 months of Skillshare Premium for 30% off. Explore your creativity with thousands of classes. Sign up now, link in the show notes. So, wrapping or going back into the beginning, right? To where, Jude Charles gets, through, from road mapping to, educating the client. Let's go back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
How do you pick and choose these clients, right? So you have your entrepreneurs that you kind of pretty much try to focus on, right? So how does Jude kind of start and engage these clients, if you will?
Yeah. So let's first talk about how I get clients. So I get clients through all of it up until this point has been through referrals. So that means when I finish a project, the client that I worked with refers me to another one of their colleagues, somebody that they're friends with, that they know that might need what I create. And so I get everything through referrals. For the first 13 years of my business, that's the way I've run it. Is everything comes through referrals.
That's nice. See,
And and more specifically, though, I'm intentional about it. So in the beginning, I'd say the first 5, maybe the first 10 years, I wasn't intentional. I just realized, okay, well, this client keeps referring me, but I wasn't like asking them to refer me, or I wasn't giving them the right tools to refer me. So what I do now is I will give them a list of who's the right client, who's the right fit for me. Or I'll be more intentional that as soon as I finish a project, I'm like, hey, do you know 2 other people that you could recommend me to? Because I wasn't having every client refer me. So now I'm at a point where I'm having every client refer me. So that's how I get clients, is through referrals. How I got my first few clients, like Keisha Dior, it was through someone else that knew the work that I was doing. I didn't do work for them, but they knew the work that I was doing. They knew Keisha needed a documentary, and they put us together. They just introduced us to each other. And it's because of that, like, okay, so I went on tour with Keisha, and then as I'm on tour with Keisha, I'm going to all these different cities. The first time that I'm ever being hired to film in different cities, it was by Keisha. And so when I was in those different cities, I would meet other entrepreneurs. I would keep in contact with them. Right. And so that's how the first few clients, that's how I got them. I've also done what I call the 1-a-day strategy. So when I failed the first 5 years in business, I learned about sales and marketing, and I wanted to restart how I was doing anything. I was running the same business, but just wanted to restart how I was doing everything. So I did what I call a 1-a-day strategy. Every single day for, I think, the first 100 days, I would reach out to someone new, whether it was a new business I wanted to work with. I just would find them online, and I would just cold email them. Mm-hmm. Because one part of that I learned about sales and marketing is that if no one knows you exist, no one knows you exist. Like, they're not going to hire you if they don't know that you exist, right? That's the whole point of marketing. Yeah. Is to keep, when people run commercials on TV, or if, people that are promoting on Instagram, it's to remind you that they exist. You may not be ready to buy from them yet. Yeah. But it's a reminder that, hey, we exist. We're here. This is what we're about. And I wasn't doing that. I was just kind of sitting back waiting for work to come my way. But what I learned by doing that is that even if the person wasn't ready to hire me, or they didn't want to hire me, what they were doing was forwarding my email to someone else that they thought could hire me. So it was still referral based. Yeah. And then so that's how I got my clients early on. But how I choose the clients that I work with is I have this list that I call my ideal client list, and I'm always updating it based on just based on experiences that I have, right? So I only work with 7- and 8-figure businesses, entrepreneurs that are leading those type of businesses. Right? Why is that? Why am I working with somebody that's at that level? There's a lot of different reasons. One, if I'm creating a docuseries, that means that you've been in business for a while and you have a story to tell that. And it's not just a story of you've struggled early on in your life or whatever, or you've had challenges early on in your life, but it's also that there is this mission and passion and purpose behind you running this business. So you've mentioned I've done businesses for people that run cosmetic business, or I've done a business coach, or Stephen Georgi, who's a copywriter, or Tracy Lynn, who sells jewelry. Like, these are regular businesses, but there's a bigger mission and purpose behind it. And usually if they get the 7 or 8 figures, that means that they have an audience and they're really good at what they do. Mm-hmm. And so other things I have on my list is like they lead a team of 5 people, right? That means, again, they understand the value of what it means to hire, to outsource, and to hire a filmmaker. They're at a point in their business where they're looking to go to the next level, or they're thinking about rebranding. What I do is not cheap. It's a 6-figure investment. I already mentioned road mapping is $20,000. For someone to think about spending or investing $20,000 into a road mapping session, they've gotten to a point in their business where they're ready to go to the next level, and they know that's what they need to do. So anyway, I won't go through the full list, but the point is I have an ideal client list. It's not just I'm looking at, who's got good money, who has money to spend. I'm also looking at who they are as a person and whether or not it would be the right fit when we are working on a project together. Like, I'll mention one more where I say they allow the expert to be the expert. Like, I don't want to work with a client that's going to try to tell me every little thing that I should be doing when I'm filming their story. Instead, I want them to trust that, oh, you know what, I hired an expert, I'm going to let him be the expert. And so if I'm in road mapping and I'm realizing like they're not allowing me to be that expert, or I'm realizing there's these red flags, that's where I start to say, hey, you know what, this may not be the right fit. We're still going to complete this road mapping session, but this isn't going to be the right fit for us to move forward. So it's all those things that I'm looking for. I created this list over time just from having bad experiences. Like I mentioned, I had a client that wasn't willing to be vulnerable. Okay, let me put that on the list. How am I going to tackle this idea of when we get ready to do road mapping, you have to be vulnerable? I just had to start documenting it and saying, this didn't feel good. As creatives, I think, and I might be wrong, but I know my experience is that when I work with a client that just it didn't feel good, I don't ever want to repeat that again. And sometimes
Yeah.
we find that we have a hard time vocalizing that or explaining what didn't feel good, or should we be feeling this way. Like I know many creative entrepreneurs that get jaded by the whole experience of working with clients, because it's just like we got into business for ourselves to create art. The bottom line, like I love telling stories, and I love when I tell a great story. That is art to me. The business side can be a bit hard. It can be stressful. Like if we're being honest, this as of this recording, 2021, last year, 2020, my best year financially. Although there was a pandemic, I continued working throughout the pandemic, and it was great. But I also burned out, and part of that burnout was a lot of it had to do with stress. And it wasn't just stress working with clients. There was other sides of stress in my personal life. But my point in bringing that up is that there's stress that happens in business, and oftentimes creative entrepreneurs get jaded by the experience of working for clients that they don't want to do it again. And what I say instead is, instead of just getting jaded by the experience, fix it. Instead of, yes, you're going to have bad clients. Nobody can escape that. You're going to have bad clients. But when you have that bad client, you write it down and you say to yourself, I'm never going to let that repeat again. And part of that writing it down is writing down what went wrong. Why did you have that bad experience? Is there something you can do better on your side? And if you felt like you did everything that you could have done on your side, okay, great. But make sure to know that that's a red flag for the wrong type of client to work with. Just whatever personality they had, or like I said, I've had clients who wouldn't allow me to be the expert, but I still did the project. Didn't feel good. I thought I could overcome it while we are doing the project. It didn't feel good, and it's like I don't want to ever repeat that again. So if there's that red flag in road mapping, hey, let's nip this in the bud right now. You're not going to be the right fit.
No, that's good advice, especially when you're starting out, right? Where, you get those clients and, you want to finish the project because you want to get paid, right?
Yep.
Right. So it's kind of like, but, sometimes we just have to be like, hey, you know what? And I've done this too, where I just have to like, sorry, but, I refer them to somebody else
Mm-hmm.
probably because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to, I know that I'll probably be miserable during the whole process, and it's not worth it for me in the end. So,
Yeah.
it's better that just to move on for that. But that's definitely like good piece of advice for a lot of filmmakers out there.
Yeah. Because
And
sometimes, and I say that I want to provide clear context for this, because I know like I'm at a point where 15 years, obviously, some people can listen to this and be like, of course you can say that now at 15
yeah,
years. There is a point when in your business where you are, especially in the early stages, you're taking on projects because you just need the money. I get that. But even then, if you're going to take on the project because you need the money, you realize it may not be a good project, it may not be a right fit, you still got to change your perspective and look at it. Okay, how can I benefit from it? It wasn't the right project. Project didn't go the way I wanted it to, but how can I still benefit from this? What can I learn from this, and how can I make it into something that's a positive? Here's what I mean by this. I think in the last episode, I told the story of how I failed my first 5 years in business. And the day that I was getting ready to quit or the day that I found out Keisha Dior made $1 million off of my documentary was also the same day that my car got repossessed.
yeah,
And it was also the same day that I was like, you know what, this is enough. I've had enough. I'm ready to quit. I tried it for 5 years. It was fun. At least I could say I did it. But instead, I sat there and thought about, wait, Keisha Dior just made $1 million off of my documentary, or a documentary that I created for her. That means that there's value in what I'm creating. What positive can come out of this? And that is at that point that everything changed for me, right? And I did take on Keisha's project because I needed the money. And Keisha didn't pay me that much. She paid me $3,000 to do part one of her documentary series. But she made $1 million, right? Like, you could easily get jaded from that.
Yeah.
But even if you're going to take on projects because you need the money, again, look at the other side of it. What good can come out of this? Can I leverage this in some way? Like, it's been 10, almost 11 years now that I've worked with Keisha, or since the first time we started working together, and I'm still leveraging her project. Even though I didn't make that much money in the end of it, like I didn't end up making $1 million, but I'm still leveraging her project. I still talk about it. I still talk about the fact that she was able to make so much money from my project. That's the good
No.
that comes from it. And it's big. And I learned marketing and sales because of it. When I realized I was so upset and frustrated that I wasn't making enough money and that my clients were making money, it was like, no, I realized I'm the problem. It's not my clients are the problem or nobody wants to pay what I want to charge. I just didn't know how to sell myself in a way that would persuade someone to pay me what I wanted to charge. And so, yeah, don't miss the context of that is the point that I'm making. Yes, sometimes you take on a project because you need to make the money, but you are able to control where you get to a point where you don't have to take on projects for the money. And that comes from just realizing what's good, what's bad, and how do you fix the bad things that are happening in the business.
Yeah, that's another good point, Jude. There's a lot of times where I myself, right, you're in a bad position, and you just think a bit, well, I'm here, and it's not when you're out of it, and it could be a day, week, or even months where after the fact, you get perspective, and you realize that, oh, okay, I actually could benefit from this, right? From whatever bad situation that I thought I was in at that time, I could use it as leverage, right?
Yep.
I could say, okay, I completed this project. I work for this so and so company. Oh, okay. So you use it as leverage, right? There's a lot of situations where a lot of people was like, "Man, I hate this job. Like, I hate this job," But 5 years from now, on your resume, or your portfolio, you have that, right? So, you know, gauge the situation, right? Gauge the situation, and always find that leverage point, right? And
Yep. Yep.
every situation, you could always, how can I benefit? How can I benefit from this situation? And I could tell you a handful of situations from my early on where you know, I still have, to this day, I have it on my portfolio, right? So it's kind of like it is what it is, but that's a good, as far as leverage goes.
No, and I think Rod, that's such the word that you just used is the whole point of it. If you're listening to this and you take nothing outside of what we said, just pay attention to this one word: leverage. That's it. That's all that matters at the end of the day is leverage. Like, and if we go down to the bare bones of what that word means, it means you're able to do something that you wouldn't have been able to do in your own power. Like you're using, like Rod said, you're using something from your past in your job that you now have on your resume, and nobody knows what you had to go through, the BS that you had to go through with that job.
Right? Yeah.
All they care about is that you got experience while working at that job, right? And so leverage, again, I mean, I use it in my own business. Dramatic leverage, that's a phase that I use in creating the projects that I create. But it's also about, like, most people will look at the bad experience that they've had, and they don't want to use, they don't want to put that on the resume, or they don't want to use it. Like, I've even, not on my current reel, but I've had reels before where I've had bad projects and I still use it on my reel, because it's not about how I felt about it. It's about, I'm using this for leverage to get to where I want to go, right?
Oh,
And yeah, if you're able to change your perspective on things, you're able to get more leverage to take you where you, it's not where you've been. It's not about where you've been. It's not about where you are now. It's about where you're going and where you want to be. And that, if you just simply perspective and leverage, if you just think about those two things, it's going to suck. It's going to feel bad. Going through burnout last year, even though I've run a successful business, it still sucks. It still feels bad. But I'm even looking at that. Okay, if I went through burnout, what can I learn from this to take me to the next level, to take me to where I really want to go? So yeah, I just want to highlight that, because leverage is the most, if you take nothing else away from this conversation that we're having, leverage. Where can you look at, you've had a lot of bad experiences, but what are the good from those experiences to help you go to the next level. Think about it like a forklift. A forklift is a tool that you use to lift up something that's heavy, right? Like a forklift, I think, can lift up to 2,000 pounds, but the forklift itself is not 2,000 pounds, but it's able to use tools to lift it up. And that's the same thing you want to do in your businesses. How can you use past experiences or past tools to lift you up to a higher level?
Yeah, that's exactly. And I like to think of it as, if you ever go on for a jog, right? Or, you go out for a run, and you're going, right, and you're like, oh man, I'm tired. Should I stop? Should I keep going? Right? It's not where at the point where you actually keep on going, you're out of breath, you're done, but it's when you get to that point and you realize, oh crap, I did 5 miles.
Right.
Like it hurt like a bitch, but goddamn, like I wanna post my 5 miles on social media because I did 5 miles, man. Like it's it's kind of like you get that sensation, right? Where it's like, where I did it, right? So it's kind of like the whole, at the end you get that you know what, I accomplished it, and it hurt like a bitch, but here we are.
Yeah, and it's. I like that you use that analogy of of running because, running or like any kind of physical activity in the beginning, it's hard. Like when you go to the gym to lift weights, it's hard, right? Like you got to start at maybe 10, 15, 20 pounds. But if you keep doing it, you get to a point where you could lift 40, 50 pounds. Or when you start running, you start with the mile. And at first, the first day you did the mile, it was hard. Like I remember I work out now, and I remember the first time I ever got back into the gym and started running a mile. Like that mile was hard to get to.
Yeah.
But the more you do it, then you get to the 5 miles, and it's like, oh my gosh, I just ran 5. Like, did I really just do that? Like, so yeah, I think it's just focus on leverage and focusing on continuing to exercise the muscle. Just like I mentioned with like I'm hiring a new edit. I've hired a new edit team. And I'm just continuing to exercise the muscle of explaining my vision in a way that gets other people to understand it. People that don't know anything about me, getting them to understand it, so that we're able to move forward in this direction. So yeah, I love it, man. Leverage. Everything about business is about leverage. And when you're able to learn that and do that, even as a creative entrepreneur, it can take you to a whole new level.
And you hit it on the spot, man. And just talking to you, man, I always get like these ideas, and I always like, all right, I could always like Kobe, like when he was playing back, one thing that he always said is that he always studied all the players, right, and he used it and he put it in his tool bag, right. It's kind of the same way where you have so many good points. So it's like, all right, I'm going to use some of these tactics that Jude is using, right? Because it's going to make me a better filmmaker or a better storyteller. So thanks for coming on, man. You're giving me a lot of, in the audience as well, a lot of things to think about. And maybe they could, use some of those little tactics as well for their repertoire.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, thank you for having me again, Rod. It's always a great conversation. We get really deep and specific about certain topics. And so I enjoyed it myself. But yeah, thank you for having me back on.
No problem, Jude. And, we'll probably have you on again. You talk about your next projects, man. But I know you're busy, so I'll let you do your thing. And, we'll see you on the next one, guys.
Awesome.
All right, Jude. Take care. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the latest episodes on the website. Follow us on social media at Hardwood Rod. And don't forget, every Tuesday we got the latest and greatest. So stay locked in. Would you like to be on the podcast? Got something to talk about? Make sure to head over to the website at hardwoodrod.com. Leave your name and the topic you'd like to discuss, and I'll add you to the calendar.